Hi, welcome to my kitchen. I've been getting a lot of activity on Facebook when I'm posting all my homemade food that I'm making, especially my bread recipe. And a lot of you have been asking for the recipe, so I thought I'd go one step further. You asked for it, and I'm now going to show you exactly how to make it and just how easy it is. And hopefully it will inspire you to make some fresh homemade bread. So we're going to start off with 4 cups of all-purpose flour, just plain all-purpose flour. That's all you need. I'm going to put it into my KitchenAid mixer bowl because that's what I use to make the dough. It's so much simpler to make, and there's no work involved. So to that I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 and maybe a little bit, so 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. And to that I'm going to add just a pinch of flour, maybe a teaspoon of salt. And that's it. That's all the ingredients you need to make delicious homemade bread. And I might add that this is the base recipe for white bread, but you can also add ingredients to make delicious garlic-infused bread. So what you do in this case is you roast some fresh garlic into the oven wrapped in tin foil. You mash it up with a fork and make it into a paste consistency. And I always like to add some fresh basil. You mash all that up and just add it in the flour for some delicious garlic bread. So now we're ready to mix the dough. I'm going to add the machine scoop here, the dough hook, and I've already prepared 1.5 cups of hot water. And to this I've added 2.5 teaspoons of dry yeast. I've let the yeast proof for a couple of minutes, and you can see that it's all bubbled up. It's nice opaque color now. I'm just going to give it a quick stir to make sure all the ingredients are mixed. I can see now that the dough is still just a wee bit dry, so I'm just going to add another maybe teaspoon of water and let that dough mix in again. So I've stopped the machine again so you can see what the consistency is now. This has been mixing for maybe 30 to 45 seconds. It's still a wee bit dry, so I'm just going to add another teaspoon or so of water and we'll give it another mix. So our dough is now complete, but while that's been mixing, I've just given a light touch of olive oil on this baking pan and sprinkled it with a light dusting of flour. So this will be where the dough will rise and then eventually go into the oven. So I'm now going to take the dough out of the bowl, and I can tell just by feeling that it's just a little bit tacky, which means I've added just a tiny bit too much water. So I'm going to sprinkle some flour on here and just knead it for a couple of minutes. And the kneading process is you take the heel of your hand and push it into the dough. This is what's called kneading. And I can feel already that it's much better. It's losing its tackiness just with that little bit of extra flour. It's now the perfect consistency. So here you have a perfectly formed dough ball. I'm going to stick it in this bowl here, but first I'm going to add just a couple of drops of olive oil so that it doesn't stick when I take it out. I'm going to take the brush. As you can see, the bowl is pretty clean. Take the brush and just lightly blend the olive oil in around the bowl so it doesn't stick when I take it out later. That's all you need to do. We're going to place this in the bowl, place it in a warm place for 30 minutes and let it rise. And you can see after 30 minutes that it will almost double in size, and then we're ready for the next step. So see you back in a few minutes. Okay, we've let the dough rise now for about 35 minutes. And as you can see, it has doubled in size. So now we're going to roll this out onto the counter. I'm going to first sprinkle it with a little bit of flour to make sure that nothing sticks. Turn this upside down. It should just fall out like so. And it's left hardly anything in the bowl, which is fantastic. So I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of dough here. And this next step is very, very important. You need to punch down the dough. You need to punch down all those bubbles that you will let rise for the last 30 minutes. This is a very important step, or you will not get a nice risen loaf of bread. Take out your aggression on the dough. And you can actually hear the bubbles popping when you do that. Okay, so now I'm going to just give this into a nice shape here, so I'm ready to roll. And we're going to sprinkle just a little bit of flour on the bottom once again, and get your rolling pin ready. And roll it into the shape of a nice big triangle, rectangle, maybe about 12 inches long by 8 inches wide. And then I'll show you how to do that. So here we go. Lightly flour your rolling pin and start rolling the dough, just like this. And I like to turn it every once in a while to get both sides of the dough so it's nice and even. And roll it into a nice rectangular shape. I'm going to flip it again. And you can see that it's starting to take the shape of a rectangle. It doesn't have to be perfectly shaped because we're going to be rolling this into a nice big log. I'm going to turn it just one more time. Just like that. Give it a little side roll to make it a nice rectangular shape. And that looks about right. Okay, now I'm just going to give it a little lift. And now we're going to start to roll the dough and start rolling it just like this. I like to tuck in the ends as I'm going. You might need to pull out the ends a little bit as you go along because it's not exactly perfectly shaped. And before you get to the end, you might want to pull it out just a wee bit. And now I have some water in the sink. I'm going to wet the tips of my fingers, moisten this dough so that it gets a nice tight fit and it holds. So there we have our loaf of bread. That will be a loaf of bread very soon. So next important thing is we're going to pinch the ends to get rid of any bubbles that are in the ends. We're going to tuck this under, out of the way like that. We're going to do the same thing with this end, just give it a good pinch, tuck it under, just like that. And there you have your log of dough. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to place it on this pan right here, just like that. Turn this around so I can get a better view of the bread. Just make sure it's nice, sitting nice and firmly on the loaf pan. Next step is you get a very sharp knife, and I usually do about in the middle of a loaf like this. You get a nice little slice just like that, and you can see already that the dough is actually working. It's still active, and it is also already splitting open. The next step is we're now going to cover this once again and let it rise for 1 hour, and then we're ready for the oven. So we'll see you back here shortly. Hi, so we're back. We've now let the dough rise for 30 to 35 minutes, and I can show you now what you should expect to see when you're making your own bread. It is now formed into a nice loaf. You can see that it's risen quite a bit, but we're going to let this rise for another 30 minutes, and I'll show you once again, just before we put it into the oven, what it should look like. We're at the end of our rising time for the dough. We've let it rise now for about an hour, but just before we put it into the oven, I want to show you a little trick on how to make the bread really crusty on the outside, if that's something that you enjoy. So in the oven, in the preheated oven, I have here a bowl of water. That will help to make your bread really crusty on the outside. So here we are now ready to put the bread in the oven, and here's what it looks like just before we're ready to bake. So I'm going to put this in the oven, that preheated oven at 375 degrees for 30 minutes, and then we'll take it out and show you what it looks like then. So see you back in a few minutes. So welcome back. Our bread is now completed. The timer just went off. So let's go and take the bread out of the oven, the one that you and I made together, and see what it looks like. And here it is, a delicious loaf of crusty bread, homemade. And you can hear the clicking I'm making on the bread. That means the dough is nice and crusty because I put that water in the oven. Here's the loaf of bread. You can see how delicious it looks. And I wish you could smell the fresh aroma in my kitchen right now of fresh bread. I hope that I have inspired you to try making some yourself now that you see how very easy it is. Thank you so much for joining me today, and watch for my next video when I'll be showing you how to make fresh pasta.
See you next time.